kick it off and get started. I'm Tiffany Feingold. I am the co-founder of Guiding Bright Minds. And I appreciate so much, as I said just a second ago, of you guys taking the time to join. I know firsthand, being a parent of a neurodiverse child, how overwhelming and exhausting, and that journey can be. Also that it's a blessing as well, with just some of the incredible people and the professionals and the wonderful team and community that we've built to work together. And so you guys are joining. Hopefully you're on the right Zoom call. So it is the call on how to ensure your neurodiverse child receives the academic support they need and deserve. And you can see here, I'm so excited to introduce this wonderful panel of experts who know firsthand, who have been in education for years and have worked for, countless efforts of what they have done in blood, sweat, and tears, and helping parents and families and children get the right accommodations that they need. So I'm so excited to have this conversation, to have this discussion with you all. And what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce all three of them. They're going to go through an overview and insight of their experience as far as what they can help and how they can guide parents on that journey of what to experience. So we're going to go into navigate your child's current school landscape, how to learn the best way to advocate with your school, and what does that look like, guide your experience to gain mutual trust, understand the school setting and what that looks like and what that means. And we are going to allow for questions and answers. And if you see at the bottom of your screen, there should be a section that says Q&A. So as we're going through this, and as you have questions, start popping them in the Q&A. That way we want to make sure at the end we have an opportunity to really address some of your concerns and questions that you have. So before I do go first with introductions, I just want to mention about Guiding Bright Minds and a little bit about my organization that my husband and I created about 15 months ago. So we're still pretty new, but as I mentioned, I have a son who is neurodiverse, and it was through that journey and that experience that helped us to create an organization and a community that brought all of us together, because I knew how overwhelming it. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? What do I do? What's the right school? How do I get an evaluation? All of those questions, that was, just can be and is, one of those barriers that get us going forward to really help our child. And so I wanted to create a one-stop shop that helped parents on that journey. If you haven't had an opportunity, be sure to check out our website, because first and foremost, we want to connect you with the right professionals, the educators, the schools, all of those. We want to provide you with the tools and resources like this free webinars. We have articles. We have a learning differences assessment that will help guide you on that journey, and also to unite you with other parents. I know that was life-changing for me, is to find other moms, other dads of neurodiverse children that I could talk to, who understood, who got it, who knew what we were going through, where we could share ideas of successes and what was working. So we have some programs. One of them that we launched was Birthday Buddies. I know it's hard, unfortunately, for kids that are neurodiverse to really sometimes gain friendships, and we often at times have birthday parties where no one shows up, and I wanted to stop that. So I wanted to create where we can come together and support one another for our kiddos' birthdays. I also am hosting a monthly Zoom call for parents, like a support group, where we just get together and talk and just hear each other, and other ways. And I don't want to just drive the ship alone. So any feedback, what do you guys want to hear? What do you want to learn about? Let me know, because again, this is a partnership, and we want to work together to do what's best and create this community of support and enjoyment for kids and for ourselves. So I will put a link in the chat as we get into the presentation on how to join. Right now, it's free for parents. You join, what I do is I send you information on events. I'd let you know what's coming up. I'll send you information about new programs that we're running and working on. So if you go to www.guidingbrightminds.com, there is a place to sign up as a free member. So hopefully you guys are part of that. But let's go ahead and kick off this great event. And I'm going to read the bios for all of our speakers. So our first speaker and expert is Chris Kanzler. He is the head of school at Fusion Academy, Denver. He moved to Colorado in 2019 for the specific purpose of bringing Fusion's unique model to Denver community. Prior to that, he was assistant director and academic dean at Fusion Academy, Lincoln Park in Chicago. Though his journey with Fusion began in 2012 as an English, Spanish, and homework cafe teacher at the Fusion Los Angeles campus. Between LA and Chicago, Chris lived, worked, and taught in South Korea, Thailand, Chile, and Brazil, combining his love of education, travel, and community building. He continues to pursue those interests and has been thrilled with the warm reception in Denver, from parents to professionals to fellow educators. Over the years, Chris has become very passionate about finding the right school journey for each student and helping to individualize the learning experience for students and families alike. He's eager to extend that pursuit as Fusion opens up a Boulder County campus this summer. So congratulations on that. Our second speaker is Mark Turgowski, who currently serves as head of school at Denver Academy, also known as DA, a private independent day school serving the needs of diverse learners. Mr. Turgowski has held many faculty positions in his 35 years at DA. He has taught all ages, coached many sports, and mentored dozens of teachers prior to his leadership. Mark also most recently served as DA's Director of Education, overseeing curriculum development and teacher training. Mr. Turgowski earned his undergraduate degree in psychology from the University of Colorado and holds a master's degree in education from the University of Denver, where he hopes to complete a PhD in education soon. Congratulations on that, very exciting. And our last speaker, Dr. Welch, is an author and child family clinical psychologist and learning expert in work with neurodiverse young people and their families. He specializes in work with those on the autism spectrum and those identified as twice exceptional. He is a resident psychologist at HumanX Academy in Inglewood, Colorado, a middle and high school dedicated to the growth and development of this population. Through his additional roles as field instructor at University of Denver's Graduate School of Professional Psychology and psychologist in private practice, Dr. Welch is passionate about training of young professionals who have a specific interest in neurological and behavioral issues. Dr. Welch began his education at Texas A&M University with an undergraduate degree in psychology and a minor in business management. Later, he completed a research-focused master's in clinical psychology at Mississippi State University and both a clinically master's focus of arts and doctorate of psychology at California School of Professional Psychology at Alliant International University. He has completed his internship and postdoctoral fellowship training at Children's Medical Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So thank you all for joining us, the expert panelists. I am going to kick it off, and our first speaker tonight is going to be Chris with Fusion. So we are excited to have Chris kick it off. I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Super excited to be here to chat with you all. And I just want to let my colleagues on here know, please jump in at any point, and you have the Q&A section down here. So we are happy to answer questions as we go. We'll also have time for Q&A at the end here. But please throw those questions in there. Really appreciate hearing and seeing where you all are from and the types of students that you're here to help. And I think it bears mentioning that just the fact that you're here on a webinar like this means that you are already taking great strides in advocating for your students. And I hope that a little bit of what I can chat with you all about today might be able to make a difference. And again, always happy to follow up. But I think I'm really taking the big picture approach here when we talk about school communication. And we can probably all agree that the communication between a family and a school is one of the most important elements of a successful school journey for any student, whether neurodiverse or not. But we know that our students who are neurodiverse need that extra support. And we also know that schools are equipped to give it. But the question is, how do we drill down and make sure that we're creating positive relationships with our schools, and that we're also asking the right questions in what can sometimes be a very short amount of time that you as a parent might have with your school admin or your teachers or whoever it might be. So that's kind of what I'm gonna, I hope, help do here just a little bit. So there are clearly a lot of questions that you all as parents and guardians and professionals will have for schools about how you're able to support neurodiverse students. And I think it's easy for us to zoom out to the big picture to try and get the most information as possible. I think that's a normal human nature type thing for us to do. And that's fine. But I also think that there are ways for us to get a little bit more granular and detailed in the way that we, again, spend our precious time in communicating. And I hope that some of the common questions that I have here might be able to transform into questions that are a little bit more detailed and a little bit more focused for just maximum value in our school communication. So some of the common questions, and I'm not going to read them all, but you can see there's going to be a big difference between this slide and the next slide and how short these questions are. So I think as families, we are very apt to ask questions like, how are my students' grades? Is my student making friends? Is my student behaving in class? And those are some of the really basic, I think, tenets of, is my kid successful in school, and what does their school day look like, right? If the grades are good and they have friends and they're participating and they're not getting in trouble, then that might be all I really want as a parent or a guardian to know. What I'll pose here is that those questions are a little broad, and that there can be a lot more value in asking questions that dive a little bit deeper. And so what I'm going to try and do on this next slide is just help reframe some of these common questions and think a little bit more about how we can get detailed about our questions, for both from the parent side and from the school and administrative side. And I really think it does help both sides here. So you can see these questions are significantly longer, so I'm definitely not going to go through all of them. But if you're asking the question, does my student complete his homework each day? Yes or no, that can be a pretty easy answer. But you might want to ask a question like, how long on average would you expect my student to be spending on this homework? So trying to find some detail in what the expectation is behind the assignment, or how long a student might need to be spending on the homework or the outside of class stuff that they're doing, can be a pretty powerful moment, right? Because if you're a parent at home and your student is spending an hour and a half on his history homework, and the teacher gets back to you and says, well, I would expect they spend about 20-25 minutes on this, that's probably a light bulb going off for a couple of reasons. One is the homework might not be appropriate for the type of student that we're talking about, and a teacher may be able to create a different type of assignment. And the other is that there might be tips and tricks that you as a parent can employ at home to sort of help get them to the finish line when it comes to homework. And so I think it's important to understand too that while your student is absolutely the most important student in the world to you, as teachers and administrators and educators, we have dozens or hundreds of students who are the most important students in the world. And we really do want to do everything we can to get them where they need to go and to get them the best support possible along the way. And so what I would say is that these types of questions, these reframed questions that dive into detail when you're speaking with educators, they really do go far in maximizing time that you're spending together. Because if you think about it, if you only have 10, 15, 20 minutes here and there, it's much better to, I would say, get more detailed. And so, for example, you might ask the question, hey, is my kid behaving at school? That's a fair question. My parents used to ask me that question all the time, and the answer was usually no. And what would have been what I think could be a better question is, regarding behavior issues, is it more of a shutdown or an acting out situation? What trends are you seeing when this happens? So that creates an opportunity for examples, for details, and it gives teachers or educators the chance to say, okay, between these two, this is really what I'm seeing more. And frankly, it helps us to think a little bit deeper about what we actually are seeing and experiencing. Is your kid behaving? No. What does that mean? I mean, maybe he's standing in the corner. Maybe he's throwing a pencil at another kid. Maybe she is crying every time a math test happens, or whatever it might be. So asking these sort of more granular questions and getting more detailed and being specific will really go a long way. And I think that is just something I would like to stress here. And going off of that, on our next slide, it is really easy to get, I guess, bogged down in the idea of a school day. And there are so many opportunities for students to interact with their peers and to thrive academically, but there are also a lot of opportunities to fall behind or to miss the mark on sort of what the expectation might be. And so, well, it's common for parents to just want the whole picture and to know everything that's going on. It's probably not likely that you'll be able to get that. And it's more likely that you'll be able to hone in or focus on an area or areas that affect them on a daily basis. And so what I would suggest is that consider pinpointing one or two focus areas. And I've listed 5 here that I would think are pretty common as a parent or a guardian when you're thinking about how do I gauge success for my student here. So when we talk about academic success, social, mental health, physical safety and well-being, and then things like extracurriculars, like Tiffany mentioned, birthday parties, or maybe sports that they're playing, or after-school activities, there is a lot of value in, I would say, ranking, from most important to least important, what your areas of focus might be, and then starting with the top 1 or 2, and then from there, crafting your questions around those 1 or 2 focus areas, because it'll give you the most bang for your buck. And it will also, again, really help the school to hone in on, okay, they're not asking me how every single thing is going. They're asking me what the mental health aspect of school is looking like. And if a student is showing up, if they're seeming, depressed or disempowered, or if they're really seeming hyperactive or overactive, then we can really hone in on those types of questions and scenarios, and I think have a more constructive conversation. And my last one here is just, I think some of the elements that go into fostering a successful partnership between home and school. One of those is lead time. And I would say the more lead time, the better. If you know that you're having teacher conferences next month, then it's probably going to be really helpful for you to think about the types of questions that you want to ask of that teacher, and even throw them their way in advance. If you have a set of questions or a couple focus areas that you really want to approach, a teacher will appreciate you giving them the heads up on that beforehand, so that they can, cognitively think through that and bring examples to the table and let you know in your chosen areas of focus what's going on at school. Another one is patience. I say real success takes time, and while systems and interventions can be implemented quickly, sometimes, you can change things on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't mean that the results will follow as quickly. And so as parents of neurodiverse students, I know that you are already patient, and I would just suggest that you employ that tactic with teachers and schools as well. Another element I think of a successful relationship is just being solution focused. So schools appreciate, from my perspective, input and ideas. So when you are helping your student with homework at home and you see tactics that you're employing that are working or that aren't working, or you see that a shutdown occurs with this subject or this type of assignment, that's valuable information. And so instead of saying this homework isn't relevant to my student and I need something different for him or her, it might be helpful to say, I noticed that when this happens, I get this reaction. So is there any way that we could shift to favor this type of assignment? Maybe the student loves reading. So if we could do more of a reading assignment versus a video assignment where he's answering questions, that could be a really powerful moment between you and a teacher where a solution occurs. And so coming to the table solutions focused, I think, is important. And then the frequency, just be mindful of the frequency that you're reaching out. We're all humans and we all know what nagging feels like, and we've all been on both sides of it. And I think it's really important to think about how you're reaching out and how frequently you're reaching out. And the caveat that I make there is that when results are happening or when commitments are being met by a school, I think it's important to allow some time in between for that success to actually show itself. I wouldn't suggest this approach if commitments aren't being made, if changes were promised and they didn't happen, or if meetings were canceled, things like that. That's a different story. But if a school is really meeting its commitments, I would suggest thinking about the frequency with which you're reaching out and really giving a little bit of time to see how results happen. And then the final one is exactly why we're here today, which is professional help. I mean, Tiffany and Kyle have created such a network of professionals around the country, really, that can assist in communicating with schools. And a lot of times those professionals already have established relationships with the schools in your community, and they know who to reach out to and they know how to reach out to them. They know the lead time and the patience and the frequency that it takes to really be successful with those schools. So I would really tap into whatever professional help is available to you in your area and lean on that, because it's a cliche, but I truly believe that it takes a village. And that's exactly why we're all here today. So that's my little spiel. Thank you so much. I will be happy to answer questions and follow up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris. Again, just a reminder, there's that Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Please be sure to, as we're going through this, ask questions. We want to utilize the experts. So I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Mark Turgowski.
Hi, thanks, Tiffany, and thanks, Chris. My professional development continues every day, and I really appreciate the framing you did. I'm stealing these slides and helping some of our parents with this. I'm going to get to this slide that's up here in a minute, but I think I'm going to take a little bit of a step back or a step up, kind of maybe more at the 30,000 foot level about how to best and most effectively advocate for your child at a school. Just so you know, I have been at Denver Academy for 35 years. That's I am both slightly embarrassed but way proud of that. But I'm also the parent of a neurodiverse child. My daughter, who's now 30, was diagnosed with ADD and lots of anxiety when she was in high school. And you all need to know that as parents, you need to know that at that time, I had probably 10, 12, 15 years of experience working with neurodiverse kids. And when it came to my daughter, I had no idea what to do. The emotional component of that to me froze me. I was really good at giving other people's parents advice about what to do with their kids. I had no idea what to do. So it's really nice to be able to be connected to professionals that can have a little bit of a distance and can help you sort things out. I think one of the things I want to touch on is the main, most effective way to be a good, best advocate for your child is to have a great relationship with your child's teachers and school. And now that may sound simple, And it doesn't mean just have a relationship with the school. There are lots of people that have relationships with their school. What I'm talking about is a very positive, constructive relationship that's based on trust. And I will tell you that at Denver Academy, we do get lots of families who, through their experience with whatever school they were at before, that trust has been broken. And I would like to convince you that that is the most valuable component of any educational situation. If you don't have trust in the people that are working with your child and they don't trust you, you're not going anywhere. It doesn't matter what interventions, what accommodations, what modifications, how many meetings, what the frequency is. If there's not mutual trust, sort of all is lost. So you're going to have to work really hard to gain that trust. At Denver Academy, we work on what's called the relationship model or the partnership model. And we don't mean just the relationship with the teachers and the students. That's critically important. Our teachers need to know our students really well. We are very fortunate that we have a teacher in a classroom with 12 or 13 kids per class. Our teachers are able to recognize when a student walks in what kind of day they're having. Our teachers are trained to, if they notice a kid who's having a crummy day, they stop everything and address that affective part of that kid before they even get started. I would suggest that it's really important not only that teachers have good relationships with students, but that teachers have good relationships with the parents. And you need to have a good relationship with your child's teachers and principal and whoever else. And really what that means is you need to get to know them. Know what makes them tick. If possible, know if they have kids, know what they do for fun. It is critical that when that phone call comes or that meeting happens, that you're both on the same team, that you can't be like two people fighting against each other. A guy named Rick Lavoie, very famous quote says, or he stole it from someone else, when two elephants fight, it's usually the grass that dies. And so we need to make sure that we're on team Johnny or team Carla or team whoever. So that's really critical. What I want to suggest is one very specific technique that we train our teachers at Denver Academy, but now I'll just go in reverse. I think every parent should be trained also. We tell our teachers that they need to make a positive phone call home once a week to at least one or two kids. They need to, quote, catch a kid doing something right. And then call the parents and say, you would not believe what just happened. Your son helped another kid who was sitting all alone at lunch. They could tell they were feeling left out. They went over, spent the whole lunch period with them, and that other kid's never had a better day. I'm so proud of your kid. That's amazing. I would encourage you, the next parent-teacher conference you have, ask your child's teacher, say, do me a favor, catch my kid doing something right, and then call me and tell me about it. This may sound very simple, but I am not exaggerating when I say a single phone call like that can shift a family dynamic and can shift a school dynamic. It can shift a parent-kid dynamic. Just imagine a kid who's at home, that, they've had a good day at school. They go home and they walk into the house and their mom says, hey, I got a call from school today. They might be like, oh God, what happened now? And the mom will say, oh no, they are so proud of you. I heard that you helped this other kid out at lunch. That's just amazing. I'm so proud of you. Yep, but that's my kid. That's the kid I know. Well, imagine what happens to that kid. They now really trust that teacher to have their back. That teacher said something nice about them to their parent, who's now going to be nicer to them at home. Imagine what happens at school the next day when that kid walks into school. They like that teacher a lot more because it's like, wow, you're not just out to bust me. You're trying to find something cool that I did. And then imagine what happens with a parent. I don't know. I can't see anybody raising your hand, but how many of you parents, whenever you see the phone call and the caller ID says it's the name of your child's school, how many of you get a little bit of a, oh God, should I even answer this? Yeah, same. So imagine being able to just shift out of that. They pick up the phone and it's not like, oh, your kid's in trouble, they haven't done their homework, they poked another kid with a pencil. Happens. But imagine just how that very simple phone call can change a dynamic. And I promise you, if you push for that and ask for that, you will see instant and cool, quick results. The other thing, I want to follow up a little bit about what Chris was talking about. I really love the idea of not asking simple questions like that, is really digging into what you really want to know. And one of the things that I've experienced a lot is with new families that come to Denver Academy, and I think Tiffany even mentioned this word in our introduction. One of the first things family ask is, what accommodations are you going to be giving my child? And this slide that's up here for me is it basically illustrates. Let's make sure that everybody who's on Team Carl is using the same vocabulary, that we've defined we have operational definitions for our terms. A lot of people, when they say accommodations, they mean all kinds of stuff. They actually might mean, what are you doing to remediate dyslexia? When they say accommodations, they might mean something like, do you allow my kid to use a calculator on a math test? All kinds of things. So the slide that I have up here, basically, I think it'd be cool if everybody would agree to these operational definitions of terms. I think it would help alleviate a lot of confusion, and then ultimately it would help get the right services to your child, and it will help develop that trust working relationship with the teacher. So I'll just walk through them kind of quickly, but basically it's this continuum in a sense from top to bottom: interventions, remediation, modification, compensation, and accommodation. A lot of shuns in there, like there could be a song written about this probably. I'm gonna do that later. But if you can frame this and then get whoever you're talking to agree to these working definitions, it should help. But if you think about what an intervention is, interventions are really those methodologies and instructions that a teacher or a school starts to implement when they notice a kid is starting to fall behind. So what you do is you just start with some sort of intervention. Maybe it's more time, maybe it's a one-on-one tutor, maybe it's something so that they don't get too far behind. So the next step in that would be remediation. And remediation starts when a kid is like a little bit more behind. By 7th or 8th grade, they're 2 or 3 years behind on standardized tests. Then it's really important to know and ask the question, like, what are the remedial programs that you're using? For example, if a kid is 3 or 4 years behind in reading and the issue is fluency and word attack and phonics, ask the school, what sort of remediation are you providing for this? That's not an accommodation. Remediation is designed to improve or recover from significant deficits. And then I'm going to skip modifications because that's confusing. But then the next is compensation. There's lots of schools use lots of different compensation strategies. A couple of examples are just using a calculator to do higher level math. So basically what that means is a kid doesn't have to have all these basic math facts memorized. They can use this calculator as a compensation, and then it allows them to process higher level kind of math concepts. Another compensation kind of technique is the speech to text and text to speech, or listening to books on tape. So this is, I want to stop here because this bridge between remediation and compensation is an important thing to understand. And I'm going to speak in probably overly general terms here, but if you think about it, you can focus on remediation, which means you're really trying to fix these deficits. If you move entirely into teaching kids compensation strategies, there could be an implication that you've given up on any progress or any improvement or recovery. And so this is a critical period of time to decide when you're moving from a hardcore remedial approach to beginning to teach kids how to use compensation strategies. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of hard just to speak in a monologue. It's better if I can see people doing this or this. And the truth is, they're not these mutually exclusive categories. Like even the compensation strategy of using a book on tape. If a kid is listening to a book on tape while reading along, that's actually a remediation tool. It is an intervention that can help with word attack and fluency, but it's also a compensation strategy. And so this would be a question that I would ask a teacher is, where are you at in this with my kid? Are you still trying to remediate handwriting, or have you given up on that and now we're just doing keyboarding and compensating? Or have you given up on a kid typing his own story and now you're just doing speech to text? And that's a compensation strategy. So it's really important to talk to your teacher about where are they and what do they expect for your kid? Is there still hope for remediation, or are we going to move more into a focus on compensation? And I will tell you, like, as a kid gets older, and maybe this is obvious, the shift should go a little more towards compensation. When they're 16, 17, junior, senior in high school, about ready to go off to college, we may not have time to remediate anymore. It may be time to focus on how to get them through their college courses. So that is my spiel, and hopefully that added something to what Chris talked about. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if we have any up here.
Yeah, there's been some that we've been accumulating in there. So why don't I turn it over to Chris? I know there's some in the chat as well. We have both of those, and then, or sorry, to Dr. Welch, to kind of wrap this all and circle again. And don't forget, in the Q&A at the bottom, please add that, and we'll have time at the end to go through that. So Dr. Tom, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. I guess what I know it is like to be a parent of a neurodiverse student is that it's overwhelming and it's scary, and there's new jargon. You don't know what to do next. And I don't know, all the way through the process at all ages, I think parents panic and they want to do the right thing and they're not sure what the right thing is. IEP meetings are overwhelmed with tons of paperwork, and it's really much more of a legal meeting than a meeting about your child and what's an appropriate next step, and how do we keep momentum going forward. And so what I guess I'm really passionate about is helping parents like slow down, take a deep breath, and develop a deep understanding for where your child is right now. Like, what is their skill set? What is the next step that we need to take going forward? Because ultimately, it's about momentum. It's about not stopping. It's about also not simply focusing on a deficit-based model. And so I think the best way parents can empower themselves is to, probably work with some outside people, some therapists, people who've done assessments, but understand not only what the diagnosis is, what the testing says, but what that means on a daily basis for that individual, because then that allows you to personalize everything, to I don't know, bring the humanness back into what you're doing for that student. And then it also allows you to be a better advocate and to ask better questions. And maybe most importantly, to time your interventions appropriately. And I think the timing of all of what you're doing with your kiddos is essential. When I work with interns and I talk to them about this, quite often I'll ask them to go to a comedy night or a comedy store where they have an open mic night. And this might sound crazy, but I think what happens at an open mic night illustrates either the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of the timing of any intervention that you're going to provide. If you've ever done it, and I would recommend it actually, because it's sort of fun. But those who are first up in the evening are the least experienced people. And as the evening goes on, you get more experienced comedians that are doing their act. They also have the advantage of people get a little more liquored up as the evening goes on. So they're going to laugh a lot, more readily. But what I've noticed is early in the evening, you can have individuals that are super bright and they have material that is brilliant, or at least there's nuggets of brilliance, but they don't have the timing or the nuance or how to present that information so that it is actually funny. And generally it's pretty awkward. But as the evening goes on, you start to get comedians that are often not as bright as those earlier in the evening, but they have a joke. And if it doesn't go over well, they have a calm and a way that they can turn their head or hold the microphone differently or say something to the person to them that's in the audience. And it works. And they can work with the audience that's there. They can change their material to fit what's going on with those people. And what I see happening a lot with neurodiverse students and families is everybody's sort of grabbing off the shelf interventions. You have autism, we need to do this for you, and this is the timing, and this is the day that it's going to happen. And people take the humanness out of it, and they're not worried about when that intervention might best be applied. And ultimately what happens is that people either undershoot where you should be or they overshoot where you should be. And this is the problem. When you undershoot or overshoot, you're going to see students being disinterested or pushing back or just being difficult. And if you're not understanding what's happening, then you're going to go down the path of behavioral interventions. And, why won't Johnny do what we need to do? Which is missing the mark completely. And I think the more that parents can slow down and understand all the progressions that need to happen to get to your ultimate goal, the better, because then you can ask better questions in IEP meetings. You can have more interesting conversations with teachers in a way that digs a little bit deeper about that unique individual. I have on the screen here sort of a model that I work with a lot, and we developed to really sort of step away from like academic goals and progress. And it's like, what are the core skills that you need to have in life to be successful? And I will guarantee you on that very top level, it doesn't matter what sort of credentials you have in the world. If you cannot show up on time, get along with others, generally meet expectations, and hold yourself accountable to do all those things, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. You could be a, first in your class at Harvard University, but you're unemployable. And these are the things that we got to work to have our kids develop. Absolutely, they have to have this. And this is the language that you need to start having with them. When we work with students, really those first three levels, so you go the be curious, accept support, and communicate, which in my mind is generally like be willing to ask for support and be vulnerable. Those first three layers are what most students are working on up through middle school. Middle school, there's a lot of learning going on, but I think biggest things that's happening in middle school is you're learning how to do school. You're stepping out of elementary school and you're learning how to work in a class and work with peers, do group work. The level of expectations are bumping up. And you have to be able to sit there as a student and be curious about what's going on. But for the neurodiverse kids, ask for support and be willing to accept that support when it's offered. Too many neurodiverse kids, especially if they've been in a public school environment, have learned to hide. You keep your head down, you don't get noticed. You don't want people to only point out what you're not good at and only work on the things that you're not good at. So kids find a way to work the system. Quite often they learn, to play the game of scoring points and getting grades and not really learning. Sometimes they cheat to move forward, but most of all, they don't want people to know that they're not getting what they're not getting. And so they have to learn to ask for support and accept it. And then as we move up, really sort of late middle school into high school, to get to the higher level, you need to start having more emotional awareness of yourself and of others. What impact am I having on others around me? Or what might somebody else be thinking or feeling? And how might I respond in a way that's appropriate for that? Learning to be persistent. Probably for the last 10 years, that persistence has been tied to sort of the grit movement of, right, being able to set long-term goals and persist toward them. But that's huge, because life's challenging. We all have adversity. And for kids who have challenges related to neurodiversity, it's more challenging. It's not that they can't do it, but they need to know that they can dig in and they can take on something that's hard and get better at it. Sometimes get really good, but be willing to jump in and persist and accept support and ask for help when it's available. And then tied into that is being accountable for others, which is, listening to your teacher, working with a tutor, but I think also monitoring your own behavior and yourself and being accountable to that situation. Like these core skills are what's behind everything else. And I think it's a big mistake if parents don't understand this as the layer that's below all the other academic support that's going on. I think that tied in with understanding, current skills and abilities helps you develop a plan going forward that makes sense for them, right? I mean, sometimes I see that the big challenge is, the parents, have expectations of, my child is going to attend this university and the school needs to do all they need to do to get them there. And we're focused on that as the outcome. And that's a fine outcome. I'm not saying that's not the fine outcome, but it's missing the point here, because if we're talking about we're going to get to Harvard University, but that child, won't accept support and won't communicate and struggles to be persistent, we're all wasting our time. And so it's important to add that layer of conversation when you're working with teachers, and I know as Mark was talking about, and he was right on about working and trusting the school, but also, having good communication with your teachers. If you are working with a teacher and you're talking about these elements, does my kid ask for support? When you offer it, are they willing to let that happen? Or are they going to deflect because they don't want the student next to them to see that that's happening? Because a lot of students just assume everyone in the class around them is getting this and it's all easy and they're naturally smart and nobody has to work hard. These are the foundational skills that you have to build everything on, no matter where your student's functioning. Tiffany, if you go to the next slide, this is the last slide I want to do, but I think it's equally important just to understand how change occurs, because we all fall into the trap of being 2 or 3 steps ahead of where these young kids are at times. And to understand, change is a 5-step process for parents. And there's also a lot of recycling that goes on. And here, we'll start at the bottom. Really, that first bottom stage is where the individual just contemplating the possibility of change. And maybe even getting to the point where they understand that change is even a thing that needs to happen. That's ground one. And there's a lot of people out there who are going through the world completely unaware that they need to do anything different. And you can't approach that person ready to jump in and make big changes or do something different because they're completely blind to that fact. It's not until, the second stage, it's the contemplation, where they're just thinking about the pros and cons of, is change possible? What's the benefit of changing versus doing what I'm doing right now? Again, they're still not ready to even jump in. And it's that preparation stage, that number 3, where they're just beginning to maybe have some self-determination and try out and experiment with some changes, but they're not there completely. And even in these first 3 stages, you might go from I'm experimenting a little bit back to I'm not sure that that was as positive as I thought it was going to be. What's happening here? And we're all the way up to stage 4 is really where there's more like independence and self-determination about, and ownership of taking change on, which is different than doing it next to mom and dad or being helped with that. And then finally, maintenance is where you've been taking action and working on whatever this change is for a long enough time, and that you're maintaining that. But again, there's sort of backsliding goes on here throughout this whole process. And the reason I'm sharing this is, there's a lot of times when parents are like, okay, we really need to work on, getting up on time and getting out the door so we're at school when we need to be at school. You might be talking to a child who's contemplating the possibility that this might be a good idea and they need to do something different. And they're contemplating, and the parents, having had the conversation with them where they're like, yeah, maybe that's a good thing. They're like, awesome, cool, we're ready to go. We are in the action stage. We are jumping in. We're going to kick butt on this. And the kid's like, what the hell are you talking about? And then they're back to like, it's not going to happen. And again, like this is the art and the nuance of the timing. Like just like the comedians, I think parents really need to be looking at this and going like, where are they really? And how do I need to approach them in a manner that moves forward? Like preparation and action are easy. I think most adults are ready to do that because you're problem solving. Contemplation and pre-contemplation is really about asking some probing questions and listening and observing. If your kids aren't articulating where they're at with this, you can look at their behavior and understand, are they scared? What are they doing? Are they ready for this change? Do they even know what I'm talking about? Are they ready to talk about college? Is that the thing that we need to do right away? Or what type of college do we need to go to? Or if you're looking for a school or a program, where is my child with change everywhere in their life? And where are they at with these basic growth foundational skills? And what program is a best fit for them right now? If you can begin to do this, you're going to be much more successful when maintaining momentum going forward, and you're going to get less pushback, and you're going to have less, inertia set in that you're going to have to continually overcome. And so it's learning the art of that and being a bit of that stand-up comedian and going, okay, that didn't work. Where do I flex? How do I hold the microphone? What do I say to the person sitting in the front row of this comedy store so that I can get back on track and move forward? And it truly is sort of an ongoing art of parenting and coaching. So that's my spiel to add to what these guys said.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much. And I'm going to be sending out, just copies of what everyone gave to us along with the presentation. So that will be going to everyone. So thank you guys. Let's go ahead and jump in. I know we do have quite a few questions going. One of the questions is how to transition a child to middle school. Who wants to take that? Oh, Mark, you're on mute.
You'd think I'd never done this before for the last 2 years. Biggest thing about transition to middle school is kids are going from this little comfortable little cocoon of an elementary school, and then they're going to this big, huge, scary place. To me, it's all about logistics and the space. Best thing you can do is before they go to that middle school, take them to that middle school. Take them there after hours when no one's there. Get them used to the classrooms, the hallways, the lockers, the bathrooms, and then take them back again when there are kids there. Sort of ease them into the physical space.
Right.
Wonderful. Anyone else want to chime in? All right. As someone who contacts my son's teachers on a regular basis, how often should I wait? So typically I reach out and I wait at least 3 days before reaching out again. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I can feel this one because I think that was kind of in my realm. And this all, I think, has to do with the caveat of what I call commitments. So are you reaching out every 3 days because you're not getting any information back? You're not getting a reply to an email, your voicemails aren't being returned? If that's the case, then I think, as Dr. Tom just said, I think persistence is probably a big piece of the puzzle here. And I would encourage you to be persistent. As a school administrator, I'm someone who fields frequent calls, and there's a commitment that I have to make to my community and myself to be responsive to the needs of that community. And so I would say, if you're not getting responses, then every 3 days is just fine as far as I'm concerned. But if you are getting responses and there are commitments that are being kept and things that you're asking of teachers or administrators are being sort of accommodated or they're being put into action, I would say 3 days is pretty much impossible for you to gauge the success of how that's being implemented, or to gauge the efficacy of whatever sort of thing that has been put in place for you or for your students. So it really depends on that. I would say if commitments are being met, then maybe once a month you're reaching out to check in, or you have a standing call or something like that. But if you're having a hard time even getting contact, then I'd say keep going.
I would say once you get a hold of that teacher, like ask that question of like, what's the best way to do this? Like, I don't want to nag you, but I have questions. Is this too frequent? What makes sense? We know what we're working on. Like, what communication model works best for you? Because again, you want to have that relationship with that teacher. And they might be trying to field, up to 30 or more calls a day or week. And so just ask for their input, and then hold them accountable to that if they've created a model for you. But try to partner.
Yeah, I love that. What if your child is gifted with autism and ADHD, but they start lashing out due to boredom, but the school won't do anything to accommodate the need? Is homeschooling better? Also, he has an IEP, and this person's in Illinois. So
Yeah, so you already know in Illinois that effectively serving the needs of twice exceptional kids is one of the most complicated, tangled up things.
Mm-hmm.
And every strength and every challenge of that kid needs to be teased out and handled separately. And it's too easy to look at those kids as an average of all of their strengths and weaknesses. Just requires great communication. It's a challenge. Because you got to find a place that can meet their absolute areas of giftedness, but also recognize and understand what their areas of challenge are. It's I hate to say this, but it's very difficult, but it's very important that everybody on board is teasing out the strengths and weaknesses so that the kid isn't looked at as average.
Right. I would say too, like, go back and look at some of those developmental skills I have in that triangle as well, and see what they're working at, and if there's any consistency there. Because I know that 2E profile is especially complicated, because you see the bright part and you're like, we got to dig into that. But you also got to sometimes slow down and go, they need to show up and be curious, and they need to ask a question, and they need to ask support, because those 2E kids, tend to be anxious, perfectionistic, and want to avoid anything that's not going to match up with that, that high score, where part of their brain's going 65 miles an hour, and then output might be going, on the on-ramp at 30 miles an hour. So sort of breaking it apart a little more.
I like this next question. I'm going to actually add to it. I know we're coming on the top of the hour. We have about 3 more questions. So if we can bang through those, but my son's school has about 20 kids to a class. Will asking for a positive call be adding to the teacher workload? So that's the question. But what I'm thinking when I read that question, which is a great one, will this also maybe ignite for the teacher to look at things differently? Like if you're saying, because during the day there's so much going on with them, that asking them to look for positive might change the scope of how. So I just wanted to add that on too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The call is the end part of it. What it does is provokes a teacher to look for something positive. And yes, it adds 5 minutes to that teacher's workload. Yep, absolutely. But once they experience the unbelievable payoff of that, I can practically guarantee it'll happen. It'll just keep happening.
Wonderful. Denver Academy, you guys are having, someone asked, will DA have first grade this fall? I heard it may not.
So yeah, we have historically we've had very few first graders. By the time families, like, it's hard to get too far behind in first grade, so we have very few families applying for first grade. So we don't have a robust first grade program. We've accepted first graders occasionally and worked them into like a 1 through 3 class. We don't know if we're accepting first graders yet. It sort of depends on how many families and can we accommodate their needs. I would say we're leaning towards no, but that's not an absolute yet.
Thank you. I think this is it, but how do you talk to your child about self-advocating and understanding themselves?
I would say even before you get to that level, I think model talking about how you feel, ask how they're feeling. That self-awareness about all of that, I think, is that foundation. And I think also, in casual conversations, talk about things that you're not good at, your own deficits. Mention it to them in the same way of like, oh, I wonder if that was hard for you to read that because of your dyslexia. Or I know you're full of energy. I'm wondering if it was, challenging for you to do whatever it might be. And I think the more you talk about deficits in a casual way, it won't feel like a shaming punishment thing, because I think kids don't want to be labeled. And I think in life, if we had to choose what team we're going to be on, no one's going to do anything that feels like it has any stigma. I don't want any part of that. And so I think if you just normalize their strengths and weaknesses on a daily basis and ask those probing questions, when something comes up in a class, it's easier to go, well, that's hard for you. Are you communicating with the people around you, or do they know that that's something you're working on? And so I think it's something you have to build over time. If you come at it when there's a problem, naturally they're going to be defensive and say, leave me alone, I don't want to talk about it, or I'm not going to tell anybody. And that's not helpful either.
Right. I am going to send out the presentation. I know somebody asked about that. 2 more. Are you guys good? I know we're at 7:02. Just a couple quick. Thank you. How much is it for the tuition for Fusion DA and HumanX? What financial aid is available? How difficult is it to enroll 2E kiddos? And I would say you all specialize in 2E kiddos, but if you could let us know about financial aid or what kind of that looks like from that perspective.
Yeah, tuition at HumanX for middle school is $27,800 and high school is $26,800. Our middle school classes are really small, so they're like 4 to 6, and high school is like 6 to 8 for that. We do have some financial aid available, but it's need dependent, and then it's also dependent on raising money to fill that scholarship coffers for that. And then admission's a matter of applying online and then coming through for a tour, and then we do several visit days with students so that they can try us out, and we can get to know students too for that.
DA tuition is about $32,000 a year. We give close to $2 million a year in tuition assistance. It's need-based tuition assistance. Not difficult to enroll twice exceptional kids at all. I think we take a great deal of pride in serving the needs of those kids really well.
Yeah, Fusion is choose your own adventure. So tuition is a la carte. Every family is going to have a different tuition, anywhere from one class at $3,500 up to full-time high school to $55,000. And we're one-on-one, so one teacher, one student. And we have a similar process of an admissions meeting, and we meet and make sure that it's a good fit for what your student needs, what our community already has, and how we can accommodate. And yeah, for everyone on here who's not in Denver, I would encourage you to look around in your local communities, because we've got about 70, 75 campuses across the country.
And I just want to add to that, and we'll host, one of the big things that I want to do for a free webinar is have the understanding of what you need to know if you are in a public school and not getting the accommodations, and that there are ways that the public school does pay for kids to go to the proper accommodation. Now, there's a lot involved with that, and it's not necessarily the easiest thing to have happen. But I want to say that there are kids that, through the process of the public school system, can get funded to go to one of these private schools that better is equipped to work with their children. But a lot more details on that. The last one I want to read here is what is the best way to gauge growth? My son is a 2E second grader. Should I compare beginning, middle, end of year assessments and reading levels? Is there such a thing as being behind grade level? So thank you for that question.
I love that question. I think when you're talking about standardized testing that is based on grade equivalencies, you got to be real careful. Every one of those is a little snapshot in time. I would be really hesitant to try to compare beginning, middle, and end of year to try to establish some growth. Like I would see growth over a period of years. For a lot of our kids, the neurodiverse kids, they sort of advance in fits and spurts. You might see a lot of growth one year, a little backsliding over the summer, a little bit of growth the next year. So it's not a great answer to your question, but is there such thing as being behind grade level? Yes, if you are talking about a score on a standardized test that's measured in grade equivalence. The worst way to measure growth is through percentiles. And this is something a lot of people get really confused about. If you think about it, if your kid scores at the 50th percentile one year, and the next year they're at the 50th percentile, and then 50th percentile for the rest of their life, that looks like a flat line. But the truth is they've made 1 year of growth every year. So be careful about percentiles.
Yeah, and I'll just tack on to that. I think growth depends on the end game. So where is your child headed ultimately? Because there's a big difference between a 4-year college or university that's competitive, or a local community college, or a trade school, or something in between or completely outside of that. So I think you have to judge growth on where you really feel like your child wants to go and where you want them to go. And that might change itself year over year. But I think the way that we have compared students to each other percentile wise and standardized testing wise, we have to strip ourselves of that mindset a lot of the time and just think about, what does my student need and where are they headed?
Yes. Thank you guys. Again, Chris, Mark, Tom, for your time putting this together. I will be sending out all of the information. And one of the things, again, I want to hear from you guys as parents, as professionals. What are you looking for? What tools or resources? And thinking about schools, we have some wonderful educational advocates, educational consultants, those that really dive into the different schools, into the IEPs and 504s, and help you understand what your rights are, how to work with the different schools. And so there's so much. So I didn't get a chance to chat, put it in the chat, but visit us at guidingbrightminds.com. Join us. I'll send you information on the events, what's coming up. You have an opportunity to fill out a Q&A to say what you want to hear about, what do you want more, do you want to learn about, and how we can help you on a journey. It's completely at no cost to you. Because again, like I said, I know firsthand, and all I want to do is help parents through that process and what that looks like. So thank you all so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it. All right. We'll see everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you all.